Okay, hi everybody.
Hi.
Very happy that I was asked to speak here to all of you people who understand me and understand what we go through. I'll save you the early part of my life, running around as a kid and all the trouble we got into. I started in 1998. I had a pretty normal life. Wife, 2 kids, had a mortgage, had a great job with a union elevator company in New York. Otis Elevator was Jeff Vanderbilt. He's not in the room, but he knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, I was living comfortably. I had taken the test a few years before that to become a firefighter in New York. It was always a dream job of mine. There's me and my uncle. I have 2 uncles that were New York City firefighters. So as a kid, I always seen the red truck going up and down the street with the lights and sirens, and like most firemen, when they're kids, something special about seeing that big red truck and the big guys coming out and putting the fire out. So I got the call, and to me it was like, wow, this is my dream job, and I was faced to make a decision as far as pay goes, because I had 2 kids and a mortgage. The pay cut was pretty drastic, but with the support of my wife, I went through and I took it, and I'm so glad I did. When we got into the academy, there was, by the way, that's me and my Uncle Pepe now. Actually, he was still on the job in 2004. That picture was taken then. Yeah, in the academy, the Fire Academy in New York, they say you're 13 weeks of hell in the academy with push-ups and sit-ups, sir, yes, sir, and dragging hose all day and basically dragging ass because they really wear you down. But that 13 weeks of hell got me a lot of years of heaven with the Fire Department of New York. During that time, I made a lot of friends in probie school. There was 150 of us in that class, and we got tight. When I got out after them 13 weeks, I was assigned to Engine 201 in Brooklyn. There's a picture there. The house is pretty old. It was built in the 1890s. We just had our 150th anniversary. The company was organized 150 years ago with the Brooklyn Fire Department, Brooklyn Engine 1. So I was ecstatic. I was in the firehouse, and like I said, it was a dream job. That's a patch, one of the patches we have. Can Do was our logo. Can Do, and it was also called the Emerald Isle because years before me, there was a bar next door to the firehouse, and if you know firemen, they usually tend to hang out in bars. So some guys left work in the firehouse and went to the Emerald Isle, and never went home, and much to the chagrin of many wives, I'll say. But yeah, I was Can Do all the way, definitely. There's a picture after a fire. When we go to fires, you're dependent on those guys behind you, and every one of those guys, when you go out that door, you know that they have your back, and they'd be willing to lay down their life to get you out of a sticky situation. We lived together, we slept together, we ate together, we became family. We partied. It's me and SpongeBob, the parties. Things were good. I did a year in Engine 201 before I was sent out to another firehouse. The New York City Fire Department back then had done something called the rotation program. The rotation program wanted to train firefighters in different aspects of firefighting across New York City. So they sent me to Ladder 8-6 in Staten Island, and I learned a lot of truck work, a lot of auto extradition, and private dwelling fires. In that firehouse, there was 50 guys. So the 25 guys that I knew from 21 that I considered family, from 201 rather, my family just grew by another 50. So I worked there for a year. I got to know the guys. I got to know their families, and it was awesome. The 3rd year of my career, I went to Manhattan. I worked in Ladder Engine 16 and Ladder 7. Learned the high-rise aspect of firefighting in Manhattan and the craziness that you could experience with a 24/7 city. And once again, it was another 50 guys that I became family with, so we got close. There's a couple of guys I worked with there. So 3 years was up, I went back to Engine 201, back home. I had a couple of years under my belt. I wasn't mopping the floor every single tour when I got to the firehouse now, because I had a couple of guys underneath me, and things were good. In September, the beginning of September in 2001, our company had planned on running a golf outing that we do every year for a fundraiser. We have a few $1,000s that we keep in a fund for emergencies in case someone gets sick or something happens. We have some money that we can help out guys in our battalion. So for that reason, I don't golf, and I had planned on working that day, even though it wasn't my group. The gentleman sitting on the right there, his name is Johnny Shot. We called him Shotsy. It was his tour to work, and I offered to work for him. I said, I got you. I'll work. You go golf. And he said, nah, don't worry about it. I got it. You go do what you got to do on a golf course. So for that morning, the morning of September 11th, we were all, me, myself, and the rest of the guys from my company, Engine 201, as well as a few dozen other firemen, were in a golf course on Staten Island, New York, running that fundraiser. The sky was crystal clear that day, and if everybody was in New York that day, that will remember that sky, and I'll never forget it. We had started teeing off. Guys were coming in, and someone came out of the clubhouse and had told us that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. So naturally, we were interested. We ran inside and we watched it on TV. And that's what we saw. We all saw that. Bunch of firemen standing around speculating how the hell, on a crystal clear day, did a plane fly into the World Trade Center? And, beside ourselves, saying, speculating. I had called the firehouse a few minutes later, and I spoke to Shotsy, the guy you saw in the picture. And I had asked him, John, I said, what's going on? He said, oh, it's a second alarm, which in firefighter terms, it's really not that big of an alarm at the time, but we joked a little bit and said, yeah, it's going to go up to much greater alarms than a second alarm. I hung the phone up with him. I said, I'll see you tonight, because I was going to be working. We both had work, planned on working the night tour. And hung the phone up with him, and wasn't even a few minutes after that happened. And at that point, we all knew it was no accident. We had been attacked. And I had called the firehouse immediately after we saw it on TV. And by that time, my company had already been dispatched. They were out the door and on the way to the World Trade Center. It seemed like 30 seconds after I hung up the phone with him, we had gotten word that a total recall was in effect. Total recall is something I had heard about in training, but it was one of those things like, it'll never happen. Total recall is when the city of New York recalls every firefighter, every police officer, paramedic, and EMT into work for a major emergency. Our order was to go to the closest firehouse, grab gear, and get to the World Trade Center. So it was asses and elbows out the golf course, and everybody made their way to the World Trade Center. The closest firehouse I was heading to on the way was my house. I stopped at my house. I grabbed my wife. I told her to get the kids, get somewhere safe. I grabbed the uniform, and then I took off. Before that, I kissed her goodbye, and I thought in the back of my head it was the last time I was going to see her. Got to the firehouse, not far from there, signed in. I met two other firemen from my company there, and there was no gear left. There was nothing to do, so we decided to drive into Brooklyn to our firehouse and grab our own gear. When we got there, there was a bunch of other guys that had just gotten there as well. We commandeered a bus, filled it up with gear and men, and made our way down to the World Trade Center. That picture there was on the front page of the Daily News a while back. That's those guys are the guys I worked with on 29th Street in Manhattan, Ladder 7. We got to the Brooklyn Bridge, and we were stopped there. By the time we had gotten there, the first tower had collapsed. The chiefs didn't want anyone going into Lower Manhattan at that time because the command post had been destroyed and the chief of department was killed, and there was chaos going on, so they didn't want to send more firefighters in there until they knew what exactly the situation was. So we, after the second tower collapsed, We made our way into Lower Manhattan. We basically pushed the chief that was holding us back out of the way. There were approximately 1,000 firemen and maybe 75 to 100 apparatus waiting on the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge to get into Lower Manhattan. So we were on that bus, and we got over the bridge, and the visibility was not so great. The second tower had just collapsed, so you pretty much couldn't see your hand in front of your face for a while. The bus driver had told us, I can't drive anymore because I can't see. And obviously, we can't see where you're going. So we got off, and we grabbed whatever gear we could and waited a little bit until you could kind of see. The visibility was probably at that point 15, 20 feet. You could see in front of you. And we started making our way towards the west side. We got over by City Hall, and there had been people mustering there, firefighters, I should say, and emergency workers mustering up there, waiting for orders. That was another barrier that the chiefs had put up to keep guys from running in. We finally got to the area. There were fires everywhere. Everywhere you looked, surrounding the Trade Center. 5 or 6 blocks long. Chaos, to say the least. There were jets flying overhead, military jets, and when a jet was flying over, a lot of people, as if you couldn't have any more anxiety, a lot of people were getting extra anxiety, thinking that there's going to be bombs dropping on us or something. We ended up making our way across to the west side, and the air was a little clearer over there. We found our engine that had been parked on West Street, and we were able to meet up with some other firefighters from our company there. And we got an order from a chief that had just been walking by and said, pick a fire and put it out. That's basically what we had going on there. It was just chaos. So we scrounged up some hose from different rigs all over the place, and we tried to find a water source. And unfortunately, the hydrants down there, the water mains were broke, so we had to rely on a ship, fireboat rather, that had been dry docked, and they had put it back in the water, and the Harvey was the name of the boat. And the guy was taking care of it, and he knew how to run it. He started it up, and we were able to connect our hoses to the main deck gun, and that's how we got water. We stretched back, and then we started putting fires out. That picture there is Ronnie. Ronnie was a guy that I worked with on 29th Street. He was in 16 engine, the engine in with ladder 7. Ronnie had escaped the building. The guys in the truck unfortunately didn't, and I think he knew that. You could see it on his face. But he was walking up West Street, stunned, and someone snapped that picture of him, and you probably recognize it. It's been around quite a bit. After the fires, we got a handle on most of the fires. We started digging. This was me personally. The next morning, early in the next morning, we got on the pile, and the fires were knocked down enough that we could get on the pile and jump in the voids and started digging for survivors, and hoping we could find somebody down there clinging to life. A lot of volunteers had showed up. People were coming from all over, helping us out. During that time, I received phone calls from, because I had a cell phone, and it was spotty, the service, but I was getting calls from guys' wives asking, have you seen them? In the back of my head, I knew it wasn't good, but there was no confirmation yet. There hadn't been a list of missing established yet. So I told them it's very confusing down here. There's a lot of guys in the hospital seeking medical attention. I don't know. As soon as I find out where they are, I'll give you a call. One of the calls was also from my wife's best friend, Denise. Her husband worked in the World Trade Center on the upper floors. He was a tech guy for a company up there. He had gotten word to her via text message, because I guess he had a BlackBerry, and back then he was texting. He was able to text his wife that he was at the staircase on the upper floor. He was with two women, one of them was pregnant, and a couple other people. They were waiting to get downstairs. They said, we can't get down because there's too much smoke. The firemen are coming up to get us. I love you. And unfortunately, after she got that text on TV, she watched the tower come down, so she knew. When I got that call from her, it was really difficult. I knew in the back of my head he probably didn't make it, but I had heard a story early on. There was a lot of stories going on down there, and I heard a story on that someone had rode the building down and survived. Later on, many years, I found out that it was actually true. And I told her that. I said, Denise, I said, I'm hearing stories of people that were in the building that made it out okay. But he never did, Walter. He didn't make it out okay. If you ever want to look that up, it's called the 9/11 Surfer. They did a documentary on him many years after, but he was in the building and he made it out alive. It was about 2 days before I got ordered to go home. I had spent the second night laying on top of the engine, being exhausted. I slept for about an hour with my helmet on the top, and it was about a few inches of dust up there on top of the engine, but I got a couple hours, and then our captain ordered us to go home. He said, go home, get washed up. So we got a ride from the NYPD Harbor Unit back into Brooklyn. And when I got back into Brooklyn, myself and 3 or 4 other firefighters walked down 4th Avenue. And in full bunker gear, everybody recognized we were firefighters. It was a surreal moment for me. I had, up until that point, I think I was in shock. But the people on the street stopped, got out of their cars. People were hanging out their windows, clapping for us. And that's when it hit me. I just kept saying to myself, why are they clapping for me? I didn't save anybody. That was really tough. That was tough, not only leaving the site and feel like I was leaving these guys behind, but yeah, knowing that the enormity of the whole thing had hit me at that time. That's me, and that's John next to me, another firefighter. By then, you could see there were a lot of candles and stuff written up. It was back to the site, digging for the first couple of weeks, still clinging, to that hope that we could still get somebody out of a void if we just found the right one and we got deep enough. Seeing this every day going down there, it didn't help. That's me on the right, and those are the guys from 201. A lot of volunteers did the right thing, stepped up, came down, and to help us all. And that effort of those people showing up down there, bringing, like socks, something as simple as dry socks. It was awesome just to get dry socks on your feet after 2 days of wearing wet socks. And it was the second night, I think it was somebody brought pizza over from Jersey City, and I still say to this day it was the best slice of pizza I ever had. In the end, we found out 343 guys were on the list. 343. I knew 26 of them on a first-name basis. There were 37 Port Authority police officers and 23 new NYPD. And almost 3,000 in total, civilians, people that worked down there, were killed. Going down there every day, after the first few days, people started posting pictures of their loved ones that were missing. And we stopped and we looked at them on the way, and the enormity of the whole situation really sunk in when we started looking at those pictures all the way. They were all over the city. Every borough, everywhere you look, people were posting pictures of their loved ones that were missing. These are guys from my company. Paul Martini, up in the upper left corner, the lieutenant. Great guy, fisherman. Probably would have been a chief not long because he was pretty sharp as far as studying goes. Chris Pickford underneath him was a musician. He had a few years on the job. He did not like Jethro Tull. He said that the flute does not belong in rock and roll. I didn't know, but he was a musician, he had a band, and he was a great guy. The guy next to him on the bottom his name was Greg Buck. Greg was incredibly talented, but you would never know it. He was, and we found this out after he passed, he was a classical pianist. He had graduated from the Culinary Institute of America, tops of his class, and he was also a registered nurse in which he graduated tops of his class. He was a master carpenter, and basically anything he ever did, he excelled at. He could have did anything, but he wanted to be a New York City firefighter, and that meant something. And last but not least is Shotzi, up in the top corner there. Shotzi's wife had just gone to the doctor on the day before, and she went to the doctor to confirm that she was pregnant with their third child. When she had planned on telling him when she got home that night, when he was supposed to get home from the tour. They were planning on celebrating the birth of their third child, or not the birth, but having their third child. On the left is Richie Muldowney. We called him Moondog. There's never a dull moment when you're with him. Great guy. He was from 7 Truck. He got killed as well. That's Lieutenant Vernon Richard. Me and the lieutenant used to work out 6:30 in the morning before our tours. He was also in 7 Truck. What a great guy he was. And the guy on the right is Vinnie Princiata. Vinnie was a surfer, and he was the coolest dude you'll ever meet. Patty Boylan on the left died a few months after in a surgery that he had he had something wrong with his legs, and he had a varicose vein surgery. He ended up dying. And Patty was the kind of guy, he stepped up and he did, he did everything. He was a family liaison. There were family liaisons appointed in every firehouse that lost guys, and he was one of those guys. And so he had helped the families through a lot of stuff, and unfortunately he passed away a few months after. So needless to say, we had a lot of funerals and memorials. We had 4 memorials in our company because we didn't have any bodies to bury. Throughout that whole time, we were digging down at the site. If we weren't digging, we were working in a firehouse. And if you weren't doing that, you were going to funerals. We had boards up to notify everybody when they came into work when the next funeral was. As you could see, some of them, there was 5, 6, 7, 8 in one day. That went on for months. More memorials first, and then as we got into the operation of digging down there, the recovery effort, we recovered more bodies, and some families chose to have funerals after their memorials. So it was, for us, 4 funerals and 4 memorials. 6 months later, I'm working in the firehouse, another firehouse, and I'm on the couch, getting late. I conk out, I wake up an hour later, and I know who it is now, but I got visited by the beast for the first time. And everybody remembers where they were when they got their first attack, right? Yeah. Well, I was on the couch in that firehouse, and it scared the crap out of me. Really did. At that point, I could say I was probably as low as I've ever been in my life, having to deal with all the funerals, the memorials, and having to look at those faces and to help the families to get through. I ran out of the firehouse with the intense pain that I had behind my left eye. I stopped, woke up the officer and said, "I gotta go. There's something wrong in my head. I don't know what's going on. I gotta go." And he said, "Go." Hindsight being 2020, I probably would have been having an aneurysm. I probably should have waited and got an ambulance and had them take me that way. But I drove to the emergency room, and they diagnosed me with unspecified migraine. Where are we? So at that point, wasn't sure what was going on. I made an appointment with a neurologist, and I got lucky. I got lucky that I got a proper diagnosis pretty quick. At that point, with everything going on, we were drinking a lot. That's why I had the Johnny Walker up there. Didn't really know what triggers were. Didn't know about alcohol being a trigger, or for me, changes in sleep pattern. And when you're a fireman, basically you don't get a regular sleep pattern. You're working a night tour, and then you're working a day tour, and you're off, and then you're working a day tour and a night tour, and you don't really get that normal sleep pattern. So that and the stress of everything, I guess, made it worse. I dealt with it for a while. Then I found Cluster Busters online, doing a little research, and it was like, okay. At that point, there had been no way to turn. I got an answer from the doctor here: take this prednisone or whatever, and take these pills, sumatriptan, and okay. So I tried that, and it helped for a little bit, but I just kept getting hit. But Cluster Busters was the only game out there. I mean, when I found out, I was like, oh, all right, I got somewhere to go now. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel lost. It was like, all right, there's a resource. All right, I read up. I read up on as much as I could. I read up on Bob. Found out, oh, look at this guy. He's a champion. He grabbed the bull by the horns, and now he's doing something. Here he is. Bob was a hero to me. He was the only guy out there fighting for us. So I got a lot of information from Bob through the website. How to cope, especially with oxygen. And lucky me, I was working in an engine company, and we had an unlimited supply of oxygen. So, at work, there'd be many days or many nights at work where I'd be sitting on the back of the engine and just sucking down oxygen, waiting for the attack to pass. There were times when I would bang my head against the wall in house watch so loud that it would wake up the guys in the kitchen, and they'd come out and say, "What are you doing? What the hell are you doing?" Nobody really truly understood the pain there, obviously. We all know what it is, but so prednisone, O2, and steroid injections, how I dealt with cluster headaches for a long time. Steroid injections done by my sinus doctor. He would shoot that long needle up there, get all the way up, and put that what is it called, doc? Triclominolone. It's an anti-inflammatory steroid or something like that. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, go there. Needle's about that long. He gets all the way up in there, and it's uncomfortable. But it gave me 6 weeks of pain-free time to get back to work, get back to the firehouse, and so it was good. I had some tools in my toolbox to help me cope. Again, thanks to Cluster Busters and the New York City Fire Department for providing the oxygen that I never paid for. But in 2010, I wasn't getting the same reaction out of the sumatriptan or the other triptan drugs that I was taking. They weren't working as well, and I got scared. Basically, those tools that I had in the toolbox weren't working anymore. I had been seeing an ENT through the fire department for a few years, having sinus issues and other health issues from 9/11. He got to the point where he said, "Look, I can't keep shooting these steroids into your sinuses every 6 weeks. It's not good for you, and you should really consider getting the sinus surgery." I had multiple problems with my sinuses, polyps, cysts. I had, rhinosinusitis, and I forget what all the terms are, but I had, basically my sinus cavity had closed off on one side, and I had a spur in it, and the spur was cutting into the tissue on the other side of the sinus cavity. It was basically swollen shut. And anytime I had gone to a fire or, got exposed to something that would make my sinuses flare up, that little spur would cut into the tissue, and then I'd get a sinus infection, and then that would just like continuously happen. I kept going back, sinus infections, more headaches, this and that, and I got to the point where, the doctor had told me, I'm not going to guarantee you that I'm going to be able to cure your headaches, but I may be able to cut down on a lot of them. The fear of not having a tool to help me cope with the headaches made me consider the surgery, knowing full well that if I got the surgery, that the doctors would not put me back full duty and I would be forced into an early retirement. Where's my oxygen? So I ended up opting for the surgery. Toughest decision I had to make. I was giving up the greatest job in the world, giving up the camaraderie that I had built up with all of these guys, and I'm gonna miss that. And I know there's a couple of firemen in the room here, they see that and they know exactly what goes on in your body, in your head when you see that. People need help. It's showtime. Adrenaline gets going. It's like everything you trained for. Let's go, let's do it. Somebody's up there needs help. So in the end, I got the surgery and I had to retire. I had to say goodbye to the FDNY. So I retired, and I consider myself lucky because I had an income, I had health coverage. I know a lot of people here, because of their disease, because of this disease, they lose that. They lose their job, they can't hold down a job, and they lose their health coverage. And that's tough. And I felt I was lucky that I had that. The guy next to me in that picture is my brother Dan. Dan's 2 years younger than me. Dan was also a fireman on 9/11. Dan developed kidney cancer in 2009, I believe. A World Trade Center medical that he had done, part of that medical every year is a chest x-ray. And they did a chest x-ray and the technician just had gone a little bit lower than normal and picked up the top of a tumor. Next thing you know, he's a 30-something-year-old fireman facing the end of his career and having a misdiagnosis of cancer. Around that time, a lot of other 30-somethings started developing cancer from 9/11 as well. Fast forward to 2015. My brother Danny, by the way, he's doing good, thank God. They got it in time. They got it in time. They saved, doctors at Sloan Kettering saved 1/3 of his kidney on the one side, so he's got a kidney and a third, and he's doing well today. Still dealing with a little bit of anxiety about having that cancer come back, but he's doing good. He is. 2015, there was a heated fight going on in Washington, D.C. to have the 9/11 Health and Compensation Program renewed. It seemed that people in Washington forgot about us. And I got off the couch and decided to get involved in a fight. I showed up at a rally at 7 World Trade downtown one day and met that guy next to me, John Field. John was a demolition supervisor that had volunteered down on 9/11, and he was down there for a very long time. He lost part of his foot down there at the site in an accident. Some steel fell on him and they had to amputate part of his foot. John was a tenacious fighter for 9/11, not just first responders, but for anybody that was down there below Canal Street in Manhattan, anybody affected by 9/11. He doesn't stop. He's a juggernaut. And that day, I told him I want in on the fight. The next thing you know, I'm in Washington, D.C. And I met that guy, John Stewart. John Stewart had been involved in the fight. In 2010, he rescued it, basically, by dedicating the whole show to the cause. So that's us. A pep rally in the morning, getting ready to do our thing in Washington. The bill, this guy over here, his name's Ray Pfeiffer. Ray also had kidney cancer. Ray was fighting the cancer for 8 years, and during those 8 years, He kept going back to Washington. He made thousand trips to Washington fighting for 9/11 benefits to make sure that Washington, D.C. didn't forget us. Recently, I'm sure everybody's seen it on TV, the Lou Alvarez testimony in the judiciary hearing room. That was a Ray's jacket that we had given John beforehand. There's me sitting in behind him. There's Louis Alvarez. Louis didn't have much time at that point, but he still made it to D.C. and I think he nailed it when he made that testimony. In the end, we got it passed, and I got that picture there because Lou's smiling. Lou died before it got passed, but I know he's smiling today because everybody got it done. I went to my first conference in 2017, my first cluster headache conference. And boy, was it life-changing. And there's some first-timers here today, and I can tell you, it absolutely is life-changing. I sat there and I listened to other people talk about the pain and what they were going through, and I sat there in tears the whole time, knowing that every single person in this room knows exactly what the hell I'm going through. I met Bob, finally, and I had goosebumps when I met him. It was like, I met this hero. Finally, I'd been reading up so much on him, and it was magic to meet him for the first time. The conference was great. The Q&A with Dr. McGeaney running back and forth. You see the energy level this guy has. The Q&A, the rapid fire, all the information that I was getting there, jotting it all down made it great. The oxygen, Bill Mingus giving us tips with the oxygen, the safe rooms, Eric and Mark, all of that stuff was great. And Dr. Schindler talking about doing research, trying to find a cure. That gave me hope, Gave me hope that someday we're going to nip this, we're going to get it. I had decided, I met Dr. Shapiro here at that conference, and I told him, my story, and he said, he had told me about the Alliance for Headache Disorders and Headache on the Hill, and I said I want in, and he says, I think I know somebody. I think I can get you in. Not knowing at the time, he said with a wink and a nod that actually he was the guy that started the whole thing. So he said, I think I know somebody I can get you in. I was wondering why, but I found out later that it was him. But there he is there. You never know who you're going to meet when you walk in the halls of Congress. And he's the guy on the right, not the guy on the left, in case anybody. All right, I want to finish with this guy over here, Larry. Where are you? You remember a while back, I'd said that a lot of people had volunteered to come to the World Trade Center. Larry was one of those people that volunteered. He volunteered down there to help people, to talk to people. And I didn't know him at the time, but I met him here, and he understands me like no one else. He understands the pain and what we went through down at the World Trade Center. And he understands the pain that we all experience with cluster headache. I made a friend that day, and I love you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. In the end, I struggled with the message, what the takeaway, what you could take away from my story. All I could say is, I had family, I had support, but in the end, helping all these other people helped me get through a lot. And that's it. I just thank you.